Ye gods, it's time to wrap this mission up completely. Apologies to those who were expecting this episode to come out a little bit earlier. I got the mother of all sinus infections and had to work through it, so I wasn't exactly in great shape. No sense wasting any time on this one, let's get right into it for what is easily the single hardest mission in this game. Infiltrator's final mission results in a difficulty spike so massive that it's honestly a little bit unbelievable. The map layout in this one is easily the single most complex, and the time limit is extremely tight, to the point where even if you know exactly where everything is, which I do, you're going to be lucky if you have more than 30 seconds by the mission's end, and that's if you're doing everything right. You cannot dawdle. Priority 1, as always, is getting a disguise. Priority 2 is getting the security card. Priority 3 is opening the doors. And Priority 4 is getting the actual mission completed. You have to worry about a lot more than the time limit in this mission. Not only is it incredibly convoluted as far as layout's concerned, there are guards in almost every room of the main buildings, there are mines near every single building, and there are constant patrols outside each building. Every single thing is set up in such a way to make it as hard as humanly possible for you to complete this one while still being possible. If that isn't enough, the alarm automatically sounds on this one, and it can kill you, unlike the previous ones. Why? Because once the last bomb's planted, you have 8 seconds to get out of whatever building it's in. God help you if the last one you chose was Building 5. Rounding out this entire fusillade of nonsense is the fact that buildings 3, 4, and 5 are randomized between 3 separate buildings. While they won't change between lives, they will basically change between playthroughs. So what this means is, you only get those 3 times to figure out where all the buildings are, and figure out where everything is. Good fucking luck. Now, full disclosure, I have beaten this game before. A couple of times. At least, I've beaten this mission before. I have never beaten the helicopter mission that follows this. But that's because a young Jaimas really didn't know how to fly back then, and he does now. So rather like my recent Resident Evil playthrough, where I finally was able to complete the game in under 3 hours on normal for the first time ever playing the remake, which is kind of a personal accomplishment for me, this is going to be another personal accomplishment for me if I manage to successfully pull this off. So let's get this done. As you saw earlier, getting the disguise in this mission is difficult enough. Getting the security card on top of this and everything else you need to do done, all within the 10-minute time limit, that's extremely rough. Like, anyone who feels that Infiltrator kind of sucks, after this mission, you're justified in that opinion. I still think it's a decent game, but yeah, this mission is horrible. Tense as hell, though. I mean, I suppose it's kind of fitting in the game that your final mission has you dealing with probably one of the most ridiculous doomsday scenarios. But you think they could have sent you in, more than 10 minutes before the end of the world? Just saying? Or maybe had someone recon the area so that we had an idea of what we were jumping into? No, of course not. Focusing more on the task at hand, we finally got the security card, which means now we can proceed to start unlocking the doors. As you can see, these buildings are incredibly complex. You have to enter and leave via various elevators, and all of the buildings have at least one elevator that you have to deal with, if not more than one. As you can see, we need to now begin the long process of heading right the hell back to where we came from. But not completely back to where we came from, because the security console is actually hidden in this building. Which is nice. It just happens to be hidden in a ridiculous spot that's really hard to get to without knowing exactly where it is. Specifically, we're headed to that first intersection north of the entrance. It curls around to the left, then downward, and eventually in towards an elevator that will take us to where the security console is. Interestingly, I figured out what causes that glitch with the room transitions that causes the enemies to immediately be alarmed. Basically, when you first enter a room, the room has to fully load. It's actually possible, if you're going real fast downward or upward, to enter or leave the room before everything loads. This will actually put you back one room. In layman's terms, what this means is, the guard from the previous room spots you even though you've loaded the new room, and because you're not in the same room, you're considered to have moved away. This is what triggers the alarm. The simple workaround, take it nice and slow when you're going through the rooms. That is how you avoid that happening. Which brings up its own problem, because unfortunately we're on Mission 3, have a very pressing time limit, and need to plant bombs on a bunch of different consoles. So in short, we actually have to do everything as quickly as possible while at the same time trying to avoid setting off the alarms. Hurry up and wait, the game. Thankfully, we're done with Building 2, and now we're on to the hard part of the mission, which is doing all the ICBM consoles. The one nice thing about Mission 3 is that it has a very simple map layout, at least for the overworld map. The inside map is a clusterfuck. In fact, one serious problem is that Buildings 3, 4, and 5 all have a very similar layout, at least for the first couple of rooms. The easiest way to figure it out is to follow a very specific route, and if the route pans out, that will tell you what building that you're in. Use the elevator and go down and immediately head to the right. If you wind up in a long corridor, then you're in Building 5. Otherwise, head up 2 rooms and then right 1 room. If that room happens to have a guard in it, congratulations, you found Building 4, which is what we're in. Once you work out what building you're in, you have to figure out where the ICBM consoles are. Building 4 has 1, Building 3 has 1, Building 5 has 4, and finally Building 1 also has 1. I cannot stress enough the importance of making sure that either Building 3 or Building 1 is the last one. You will not survive to escape the mission otherwise. The reason for this is very simple. As I said before, once you've planted the final explosive, there's an 8-second timer before the bombs go off, killing you if you're in the building, and setting off all the alarms. It does, however, complete the mission. We're getting nice and close to where the first ICBM console is, so it's time to get ready. As is always the case, you want to make sure that you render any guard in the room unconscious before going for the objective, in this case the ICBM console. Once you're in the room, equip the explosives and interact with the console as if you were searching something. That'll plant the bomb. Afterwards, get the hell out of there. With the first bomb planted, our next order of business is to head to the next building and, fittingly enough, deal with any ICBM consoles there. Unfortunately, this is a very long trip, as you can see by our in-game map. A lot of backtracking is needed in this mission, since you're constantly having to enter and leave each building in order to plant the bombs and get out. One thing I can give this mission is I really like the environment setup it does for this one. It really does a nice job of really ramping up the tension, especially considering the time limit that you also have to deal with. This is not an easy mission, and it really likes to make it show. Really a nice fitting end for this kind of thing. The main problem is, unlike other games that couch the same general premise, like, say, Metal Gear, which I've also done, or Snake's Revenge, Infiltrator really doesn't up the challenge on an individual level much. You don't have any unique security devices you have to circumvent, you don't have any unique hazards you have to deal with, or enemies to fight. It's always the same guards, it's always the same alarms, it's always the same setup. Just different objective, different timer, and different general base layout. And I suppose that isn't bad. It is generally a product of its time, considering that the original game came out in like 1984. Actually, it's kind of funny. The fact that I've been doing so many games that also had ports on other consoles has led me to want to do Impossible Mission 2 again. I've always wanted to give Mercenary Cobra 1 a nice view of how the game works, and really, I think I could do a good job of it. I'm considering a playthrough of either Metroid Mother or Metroid Rogue Dawn later. Probably Mother, because Mother's fucking great. If you're not familiar, it's basically a ROM hack for the original Metroid that makes it so that the graphics look quite a bit more intense, and also allows the beams to combine, which makes the game a lot more interesting. It also makes both Ridley and Kraid look way more imposing, and does a lot to make Mother Brain look cool too. If we're talking pure visual stylings, then it's second place only after Rogue Dawn as far as how it looks. We've successfully planted 1 bomb, and that means that there's only 3 more to plant in this particular building. And good God, the clock's ticking on this one. You know what's funny? This game kind of reminds me of Spy vs. Spy at times. It's a 2-player versus game that pretty much was one of the first licensed games I found genuinely enjoyable. You take the role of the black and white spy, respectively, and are running around a building trying to gather up a suitcase with papers, money, and I think a passport. Once you have all 3, the objective is to get to the airport and get the hell out. But all is not as it seems, because both players can set an unlimited number of death traps, and also can fight and kill one another. You have an unlimited number of lives in both cases, but basically the idea is that you have to use these to get and keep the upper hand, while at the same time dealing with the other player. It's in this regard, however, that the Commodore version is much better than the NES version, for many reasons. The NES version has an equipable set of weapons, specifically a knife and a club. Equipping the knife will decrease the number of hits it takes to kill on a player to 4, and the club will decrease it to 6. The problem is that both players can't get these weapons, so the player that gets the knife is going to have a huge advantage in combat for the most part, necessitating that the other player get way more aggressive and way more intelligent with the use of their trap placement. That's not to say it's bad by any stretch, it's just that the Commodore version is much more balanced when it comes to combat, and includes additional traps for good measure. In the Commodore version, both players have clubs by default. You can also block attacks, which is a huge improvement. Anyway, focusing on Infiltrator. We're approaching the end game for this particular building. At the moment, we have to work our way around to the final console, plant our bombs on that, and then we can get the hell out and move on to the next one. Time, as you can see, is ticking. Interestingly, I ran a little test recently on the gas grenade, and I did find out that it does actually keep the guard unconscious for slightly longer than the sleep gas. By like half a second. Something to consider if you have to dawdle for an extended period of time in a given room. One really annoying feature is that damn near every room in Building 5 has a guard in it. Like, I'm serious. I think it's like 80% of the rooms have guards in them. It's insane. Paired with the really roundabout way that this map tends to make you go around, it means you tend to waste a lot of time on this one. Time that is not on your side, as we have established at this point. So you gotta keep moving. Lights a fire under your ass. Speaking of which, we have successfully planted the bomb on this one, and that leaves only 2 left. Unfortunately, one is in Building 3, and the other is in Building 1, completely opposite ends of the map. And time is rapidly running out. Jeez, I haven't been this pressed for time since my Resident Evil run recently. That one was something of a personal accomplishment for me. I've always been a fan of the Resident Evil remake, and I really, really like that game. But if you're playing the game the way that the game wants you to play it, you're going to take forever to go through it, since the game encourages you to basically use a certain form of survival management. Figuring out which zombies to permanently remove from the game or not by using the oil, or conserving ammo by using certain weapons at certain times in order to make your ammo go that much further. All this is important stuff in gameplay, and it really, really helps to give the game a tense environment. But you really don't have the opportunity to do that while at the same time you're going fast. It's honestly the same problem I have with many of the Metroid games versus the Prime games. Prime games don't give you a time limit, they encourage you to explore, but the other Metroid games give you a time limit of about 2 to 3 hours if you want to get the best endings. And I've gotten some of those best endings, I've done some of that. But that doesn't change the fact that it fundamentally shows a complete betrayal of the game's own design ethos. Anyway, it's something I was very happy to complete because now I'll be able to play around with the rocket launcher whenever I so choose in the future. Meanwhile, second to last bomb place, there's only one more ICBM console to place a bomb on. By the way, did you notice that I had to use the mine detector the last couple of times I've gone down below maybe a third or so of the screen? That's because these 3 buildings all have mines all around them. And they specifically do this to keep you from being too cautious in your approach, because the guards here are all closer to the buildings themselves, ergo increasing the odds that you'll fuck up somehow. But ever ready for more is Jimbo Baby under our command, and we're quickly working our way back to Building 1 in order to plant the last bomb. Now, the reason I encourage you to do Building 1 last is because Building 1 happens to be the closest one to the entrance. There's no elevator to take, so it doesn't cost you any time there, and it's the easiest one to get to and get out after you've planted the last bomb, ergo increasing your odds of survival. And here we are at the last console, once we deal with the guard anyway. We plant the explosives, and we get the hell out. Seriously, we have no time to lose. Just keep run. Or walk really fast in Jimbo Baby's case. You have about 10 seconds of game time to get out. And thankfully, we managed just that. All that remains is to make it back to the helicopter, and there is not a lot of time left to spare on that one. All we have to do is skirt the map the same way we did last time when we entered this area, avoid the guards, get a little bit closer, and we're done.